At the closing dinner for the sale of our family's vineyard, my younger brother Lucas stood up, loosened his silk tie, and raised a glass of our 1998 Reserve Cabernet, a bottle that retailed for $600 and was legally designated as part of the winery's archival stock.
To the end of an era, he shouted, his face flushed with expensive wine and unearned arrogance. And to the $15 million hitting our accounts tomorrow. Mom, Dad, enjoy retirement. I'm buying the yacht. The room erupted. My parents clapped until their hands hurt. The lawyers for the buyer sat quietly at the end of the table, checking their expensive watches. I sat to my father's left, swirling my water, completely silent. Lucas turned to me, that pitying smirk plastered on his face. And to Elena. Don't worry, sis. The new owners said they might keep you on as a mid-level manager.
If not, I'm sure I can toss you a few grand to help you find a new apartment. Mom reached over and patted my hand, her diamond bracelet clicking against the table.
It's for the best, sweetie. Lucas has big plans for the capital. You were always better at the labor part.
Besides, we need you to sign one last document tonight to clear your name from the liability insurance. I didn't pull my hand away.
I didn't cry.
I just looked at the lead attorney at the end of the table. A man I had been secretly emailing for 3 months. And nodded once.
He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single red folder. The room didn't go quiet immediately. It took a second for my father to notice the shift in atmosphere. But when I stood up, the silence hit like a physical blow. Actually, Lucas, I said, my voice steady enough to calibrate a scale. There is no $15 million. You aren't buying a yacht.
And I'm not signing any liability waivers. Because I know you forged my signature on the loan applications 3 years ago. Lucas laughed, nervously.
She's had too much to drink. Dad, get her out of here. But Dad was staring at the red folder the lawyer had just slid across the mahogany table. Elena, sit down, he growled. Don't ruin this. I'm not ruining it, I replied, picking up my water glass and pouring it slowly onto the floor.
I'm closing it. Before I tell you how I stripped my family of everything they thought they owned in a single signature. Drop a comment below with your city. I want to know where you're watching from. Especially if you've ever been the person doing all the work while someone else took all the credit.
Smash that like button if you're ready to see a golden child get a reality check that cost him 8 figures.
My name is Elena Vance. And my family owns, or thought they owned, one of the most prestigious boutique wineries in Northern California.
From the outside, we were royalty. But inside, we were a dictatorship run by my father, with Lucas as the crown prince who could do no wrong. I spent 12 years breaking my back in the fields.
I learned fermentation science at UC Davis. I managed the harvest crews. I balanced the books. And I kept the business profitable while Lucas spent his marketing budget on trips to Vegas and sports cars.
My grandfather, Nano, started this place. He was the only one who saw me. While my parents fawned over Lucas's charm, Nano watched me work. He died 4 years ago, and the will was simple. Everything went to Dad. Or so they thought. Dad immediately handed the reins to Lucas. Within 3 years the vineyard was bleeding money. Lucas had leveraged our assets to fund tech investments that went to zero.
To save themselves from bankruptcy, they decided to sell the winery to a holding company called Obsidian Ventures. They didn't tell me until the deal was done.
They were selling my home, my work, my legacy, just to cash out and save Lucas's reputation. But there was a darker twist I discovered only weeks before the sale.
I found a folder in my father's study labeled Elena, Liability. Inside were loan documents for $4 million, all signed by Elena Vance. They hadn't just planned to sell the winery. They planned to pin the company's massive debt on me, claim I was the one who mismanaged the funds, and use the sale money to start over while I went to prison for fraud.
They were going to sacrifice me to save Lucas. The betrayal cut deep, deeper than I thought possible. I almost went to the police right then. But police investigations take years and my family had expensive lawyers. I needed something faster. I needed something absolute. I did what Nano taught me. I looked at the soil, not the fruit. I dug deeper. When the sale was announced, I started investigating Obsidian Ventures. I expected to find a foreign conglomerate. Instead, I found a shell company with a registered agent in Delaware. I tracked the digital paper trail, expecting to see a competitor.
But what I found was a loophole my grandfather had buried in the original corporate bylaws 40 years ago, a founder's protection clause. This clause was a secret weapon Nano had left behind. It stated that if the family ever attempted to sell more than 50% of the controlling interest to an outside entity without unanimous shareholder consent, a dormant trust would activate.
The beneficiary of that trust? The eldest grandchild. Me. But here is the twist. I didn't have the capital to buy them out, and simply stopping the sale wouldn't be enough. They would just find another way to ruin me. I needed to be the one holding the checkbook.
I remembered Nano telling me about a rainy day fund he hid in the old cellar. Not cash, but a collection of pre-prohibition wines he had bought in the 1950s.
The family thought those bottles were spoiled vinegar. I had them appraised quietly at night. They were worth $18 million. I liquidated the collection through a private broker in Hong Kong, creating my own capital. Then, I did something dangerous. I set up my own shell company, assumed a pseudonym, and I bought Obsidian Ventures. The family didn't know who was behind the shell company. They just saw a faceless buyer offering $15 million. Exactly enough to cover Lucas's debts and leave them rich. They were so greedy, so desperate to cash out. They didn't read the fine print of the acquisition contract. The contract stipulated that the purchase price was subject to a due diligence audit regarding internal embezzlement and fraudulent signatures. If embezzlement was found, the purchase price would be deducted dollar for dollar to cover the liability. I knew Lucas had stolen $4 million. I knew Dad had hidden another $3 million. And I knew about the forged loans. I let them sign the papers. I let them plan the closing dinner. I waited until the champagne was poured. If you are loving this level of strategic petty, subscribe to the channel right now. I post stories like this every week. And you do not want to miss the next update on what happened to Lucas's sports car collection. Back at the dinner table, the lawyer slid the red folder to my father. Mr. Vance, the lawyer said, his tone icy. As per the contract you signed last week, Obsidian Ventures has completed its audit. We found $7.2 million in misappropriated funds, unauthorized loans, and massive tax evasion. We also found evidence of forgery regarding Ms. Elena Vance's signature. Dad turned pale, sweating through his dress shirt. That's an internal matter. We settled that after the sale. The buyer doesn't need to know family business. No, I cut in, leaning back in my chair. You settle it now. Because the buyer knows everything. Lucas slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. Who do you think you are? You're a nobody. Obsidian Ventures is buying us out.
We are dealing with billionaires, not failed winemakers like you. I smiled, a cold, sharp expression that felt like armor. Lucas, look at the signature line for the CEO of Obsidian Ventures on page 42. He grabbed the folder, ripping it open, his eyes scanning the document frantically.
I watched his soul leave his body. Elena Vance, he whispered. No. This is a lie. This is a prank. I bought the holding company 3 months ago, I said, voice ringing clear in the silent room. I am the buyer. And per the contract you signed, the $15 million purchase price is being adjusted.
After deducting the $7.2 million you stole, the $4 million in forged loans you tried to pin on me, and the $8 million in debt you leveraged against the land.
The final payout to the Vance family is negative $4.2 million. My mother gasped, clutching her pearls. Negative? You mean we get nothing? But we promised the yacht broker deposit. I mean you owe me money, I corrected. But because I'm generous, and because I don't want you starving, I'm waiving the debt. In exchange for your immediate resignation and departure from the property.
And one more thing. Lucas confesses to the forgery on video. Right now. Or I hand this folder to the FBI. The room exploded.
Dad started shouting about lawsuits.
Mom started crying about how family doesn't do this. Lucas looked like he was going to be sick on the expensive tablecloth.
You trapped us. Dad screamed, purple veins bulging in his neck.
You tricked your own father. I didn't trick you, I said, standing up and signaling the security guards I had hired, who were waiting in the hallway.
You tried to sell my grandfather's legacy to a stranger. You tried to frame me for prison. I just bought what was mine to begin with. And Mom? Don't think I don't know you notarized those forged signatures. You're in the folder too. My mother froze, her tears stopping instantly as pure fear took over. The deed transfer was recorded this morning. This is now my property. You have 1 hour to clear your personal effects from the main house. The locks are being changed at 9 p.m. My mother grabbed my arm, desperation clawing at her. Elena, please. Lucas has gambling debts. If he doesn't pay them, bad people are coming for him. You can't do this.
He's your brother. I looked at her. The woman who watched me work 14-hour days while Lucas slept in. The woman who was willing to let me rot in a cell to save her son. And I felt absolutely nothing.
Then I guess Lucas better learn how to harvest grapes, I said. I'm hiring seasonal laborers. Minimum wage. He can start Monday.
But if he steps foot in the office, I call the feds. Lucas lunged at me, screaming, grabbing a steak knife from the table.
I'll kill you.
You stole my life. The security guards were on him in a second, slamming him onto the floor. the knife skittering across the parquet.
"I'll burn this place down," he screamed, his face pressed against the wood. "Try it," I said calmly, looking down at him. "I'm fully insured. And I'd love to send you to prison for arson on top of the embezzlement."
It would make the Thanksgiving seating chart much simpler if you would have called the cops right then and there. Comment, lock him up. I decided to let him live in poverty because I thought it would hurt more.
Was I right? They left that night. It was ugly. There was screaming, throwing of vases, and threats of disownment.
I stood on the balcony of the main house, drinking the rest of that $600 Cabernet directly from the bottle, watching their taillights disappear down the winding driveway.
That was 6 months ago. Since then, the winery has turned its first profit in 5 years.
I rebranded, removing the family name and calling it Nono's Legacy. I fired the lazy staff Lucas had hired, his frat brothers mostly, and promoted the workers who actually knew the soil.
But the story doesn't end there. Last week, my security system alerted me to an intruder in the vintage cellar. I pulled up the camera feed on my phone. It was Lucas. He looked terrible, unshaven, thinner, wearing dirty clothes. He was trying to pry open the lock on the reserve cages, looking for anything to steal and sell. I didn't call the police immediately. I walked down there with my head of security and 2 Dobermans. When I flipped the lights on, he froze. He started crying, begging me for money, telling me he was living in his car. He said Dad had cut him off and Mom was filing for divorce. He asked for just 1 bottle to sell so he could eat. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the monster who tried to frame me. "You want a job, Lucas?" I asked. He nodded eagerly. "I need anything, Elena." "Please." "Manager? Assistant?" "No," I said, tossing him a pair of shears. "The vines on the north ridge need pruning. It's 40 degrees out there. $15 an hour. Take it or I call the cops for breaking and entering." He took the shears. He works for me now. He hates every second of it, and every time I drive past in my truck, I make sure to wave.
Dad is living in a condo, working as a consultant, but nobody in the valley will hire him once word got out about the cooked books.
Mom sends me emails on holidays, asking to meet for coffee. I have a filter set up, they go straight to trash. I didn't just win an inheritance fight. I executed a hostile takeover of my own toxic family. And the air up here, at the head of the table? It's never tasted sweeter. If you think Lucas deserved the pruning shears, hit that like button.
And if you want to hear the audio recording of the moment my dad realized he was bankrupt, check out the next video on my channel.
You won't believe what he said. Thanks for watching.